A crack formed across the fabric of reality, silent, impossible, and glowing with power no world was prepared to understand. The year was 1945. Captain Steve Rogers aimed the nose of the Valkyrie down toward the Arctic ice, his hand steady on the controls even as frost crept across the windshield. The Tesseract pulsed in the bomber's hull behind him, its blue energy flickering with increasing violence. He'd made his choice. Peggy's voice crackled through the failing radio, but her words were lost beneath the roar of wind and the high-pitched whine building from the cosmic cube. "I'm gonna need a rain check on that dance," Steve whispered. The Tesseract exploded, not with fire or force, but with pure spatial rupture. Reality tore like fabric, and Steve Rogers fell through the wound between worlds. The ice never touched him. The freeze never came. Instead, he tumbled through a kaleidoscope of fragmenting dimensions, seeing 1,000 Earths, 1,000 futures, all collapsing into a single brilliant point of light. Then darkness, then metal beneath his hands. Steve's eyes snapped open. The air smelled wrong, recycled, sterile, humming with the vibration of engines he couldn't identify. He lay on a cold deck plating, his shield still magnetically locked to his forearm. Emergency lighting cast everything in crimson shadows. The walls were smooth, almost organic in their curves, embedded with glowing panels that pulsed like a heartbeat. He rolled to his feet, shield raised, every muscle coiled for combat. The room was circular, perhaps 30 feet across. Consoles lined the walls, displaying text in English but arranged in configurations he'd never seen. Through a viewport, stars streaked past in impossible patterns, not the stars of Earth's sky, but alien constellations moving at speeds that defied comprehension. A door hissed open. 6 soldiers rushed in, wearing black uniforms trimmed with gold. Each carried a weapon Steve didn't recognize, sleek devices that resembled flashlights more than guns. But the way they aimed them, the tactical discipline in their movements, told him these were firearms of some kind. "Freeze," the lead soldier barked. "Hands where we can see them." Steve's eyes narrowed. The uniforms bore a symbol that sent ice through his veins despite the warm air, a dagger piercing a globe surrounded by stars. Not the hopeful stars of freedom, but the cold glitter of conquest. "Who are you?" Steve demanded, shield still raised. "What is this place?" "The Terran Empire doesn't answer to prisoners," the soldier replied. His face was hard, scarred, the look of a man who'd killed without hesitation. "You're aboard the ISS Constellation. You will comply or be subdued. Empire." The word carried weight Steve knew too well. He'd just spent years fighting an empire, watching it burn Europe, murdering millions in its hunger for domination. "I don't know how I got here," Steve said carefully, assessing the room's exits. "But I'm not your enemy. I'm Captain Steve Rogers, United States Army." "There is no United States," another soldier interrupted, laughing. "There's only the Empire, and you're an unregistered life form who materialized in a restricted section of an Imperial warship. That makes you a threat." The weapons powered up with a high-pitched whine. Steve moved. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, shield deflecting the first energy blast that lanced toward him. The bolt splashed across the vibranium in a cascade of orange light, dissipating harmlessly. 2 more shots followed. Steve angled his shield, redirecting one blast into a console that exploded in sparks, then hurled the shield in a perfect arc. It struck the lead soldier's weapon, ricocheted off the wall with a metallic ring, hit 2 more soldiers in rapid succession, and returned to Steve's arm as he caught it without looking. 4 soldiers down, 2 remaining. They rushed him with shock batons crackling with blue electricity. Steve ducked under the first swing, drove his elbow into the soldier's solar plexus, and swept his legs. The second soldier managed to land a glancing blow to Steve's shoulder. Pain lanced through him, more intense than he'd expected, the electricity disrupting his nervous system for a heartbeat. But only A heartbeat. Steve grabbed the baton, twisted it from the soldier's grip, and drove the man back with a straight punch that sent him crashing into the wall. The soldier crumpled, unconscious. Steve stood among the fallen, breathing steady despite the adrenaline, and examined one of the weapons. It was warm to the touch, no visible ammunition, just energy cells embedded in the grip. Some kind of directed energy weapon, advanced, far beyond anything he'd seen in the war. The intercom crackled to life. "Intruder subdued security team Delta 7, a cold female voice announced. "All sections, we have a hostile entity in Science Lab 3, believed enhanced. Authorization given for lethal force." Enhanced. They knew. Steve moved toward the door, but it sealed with a pneumatic hiss before he reached it. The lights shifted from red to amber, and a low humming filled the air. Through the viewport, Steve watched as the ship dropped out of whatever impossible speed it had been traveling at. A massive space station came into view, a sprawling construct of metal and light, bristling with weapons ports and docking bays. Ships of various sizes swarmed around it like metallic insects. The console behind him flickered to life, displaying a face Steve had never seen but would never forget. The man was perhaps 40, with sharp features and calculating eyes. He wore a uniform similar to the soldiers but more ornate, dripping with medals and rank insignia. A sash crossed his chest, and a ceremonial blade hung at his hip. Behind him, a throne room stretched into shadows. "Well," the man said, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of absolute authority, the enhanced human who appeared from nowhere. "How intriguing." "Who are you?" Steve demanded. "I am Emperor James Tiberius Kirk, sovereign ruler of the Terran Empire, master of Earth and its colonial territories spanning 67 star systems." Kirk leaned forward, studying Steve with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "And you, Captain Rogers, are about to tell me how a man from Earth's distant past materialized aboard one of my warships with physiology that shouldn't exist for another 2 centuries. Steve's grip tightened on his shield. The implications crashed over him like a wave. Not just a different place, a different time, a different future. And in this future, humanity hadn't learned from its mistakes. It had perfected them. "I'm not telling you anything," Steve said. Kirk smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see about that. Welcome to the 23rd century, Captain. I think you'll find the Empire has ways of extracting information that would make your Nazi adversaries look positively primitive." He gestured off-screen. "Bring him to the station, intact if possible, but bring him." The transmission cut. The door opened, revealing a corridor lined with dozens of soldiers, all weapons trained on the lab. Steve took a breath, adjusted his shield, and prepared for what came next. If you want to see more universe crossovers, hit subscribe and comment which character or world you want to see collide next. Behind him, through the viewport, the space station's docking bay doors opened like a mouth preparing to swallow him whole. The holding cell was a 10-foot cube of transparent aluminum reinforced with force fields that shimmered like heat waves. Steve stood in its center, shield confiscated, hands bound with energy manacles that hummed against his wrists. Beyond the transparent walls, technicians in white coats moved between stations, their instruments scanning him with beams of light that felt like insects crawling across his skin. The space station, they called it Sigma 7, was a monument to imperial power. Through the cell's transparent ceiling, Steve could see the massive central hub rising above him, its architecture brutal and efficient. Ships came and went in precise patterns, their movements coordinated by some invisible hand. Everything was order, everything was control, everything was wrong. "Remarkable," one of the technicians murmured, studying a readout. "His cellular structure is decades ahead of documented 20th century human biology. Enhanced bone density, accelerated healing factors, muscle tissue that shouldn't be possible without genetic manipulation. Could he be from one of the outlying colonies? Another asked. Perhaps a failed augmentation project we lost records of? No. The first technician zoomed in on a genetic scan. His DNA is baseline Terran, Earth origin. But the enhancement serum in his system, it's elegant, simple, almost primitive in its design, yet completely effective. Whoever created this understood human physiology on an intuitive level our best scientists haven't matched. Steve listened, parsing information from their clinical discussion. This future, this twisted version of humanity's destiny, had conquered the stars but built its empire on the foundation of cruelty. Through the cell walls, he'd watched guards casually strike alien prisoners, seen technicians discuss experimentation with the detachment of people discussing equipment maintenance. The Nazis had called their victims less than human. These people called them subjects. A door hissed open, and the technicians immediately straightened to attention. A woman entered, her uniform crisp and decorated with the rank insignia Steve was learning to recognize. Someone important. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes held the cold assessment of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "Captain Rogers," she said, approaching the cell. "I am Commander Marlena Moreau, Chief Science Officer of this station. The Emperor has authorized me to conduct a full analysis of your unique physiology." "I'm not a lab experiment," Steve replied evenly. "Everything in the Empire serves a purpose, Captain. The question is whether you serve it willingly or unwillingly." She gestured to a technician who activated a holographic display showing Steve's body in rotating three-dimensional detail. "The serum in your bloodstream is remarkable. It's bonded to your genetic structure on a cellular level. Remove it, and we remove you. But replicate it," she smiled. "The Empire could create an army of enhanced soldiers, an army that could crush the remaining resistance in weeks instead of years." "That serum was created to fight tyranny," Steve said, "not serve it." "How quaint. Tell me, Captain, do you know what year it is?" "Your Emperor said something about the 23rd century. 2267 to be precise. You've traveled 322 years into your future. The Earth you knew, with its squabbling nations and primitive ideologies, is long gone. Humanity united under the Empire, expanded to the stars, and claimed our rightful place as the dominant species in this quadrant of the galaxy." She stepped closer to the cell, her reflection fractured across its transparent surface. "The Vulcans tried to stop us with their logic. We enslaved them. The Andorians resisted with their military might. We conquered them. The Tellarites thought they could negotiate. We subjugated them. Every species that stood in humanity's path has learned the same lesson: the strong rule and the weak serve." Steve's jaw tightened. "That's not strength. That's just brutality with better weapons. And yet we won. Your idealism died with your century, Captain Rogers. This is reality now." The door opened again. This time, armed guards entered, flanking a figure that made every technician in the room tense. He was tall, lean, with pointed ears and upswept eyebrows that marked him as non-human. A Vulcan, if Steve understood correctly. But where the others had described Vulcans as enslaved, this one wore the uniform of the Empire, his rank insignia indicating high command. "Commander Spock," Moreau said, her tone shifting to something cautious. "I wasn't expecting an inspection. The Emperor's interest in this anomaly supersedes standard protocols." Spock's voice was deep, controlled, utterly devoid of emotion. He studied Steve with the intensity of a chess player analyzing an opponent's opening move. Fascinating. A human from Earth's 20th century, enhanced through chemical means rather than genetic manipulation. The probability of such a being surviving temporal displacement is approximately 0.0003%. Yet here I am, Steve said. Spock raised an eyebrow. Indeed, which suggests forces beyond conventional scientific understanding were involved in your arrival. The Tesseract, perhaps. The Kree artifact that disappeared from Earth in 1945. Steve's surprise must have shown on his face. We have extensive records of Earth's history, Captain Rogers, including the Nazi regime's occult weapons division and Howard Stark's attempts to harness alien technology. The Tesseract's disappearance coincided with your own. The correlation is logical. If you know who I am, then you know I fought against exactly what your empire represents. I know you fought for a nation that interned its own citizens based on ethnicity, developed weapons capable of annihilating cities, and built its prosperity on centuries of slavery and exploitation. Spock clasped his hands behind his back. Your moral high ground is built on convenient historical revisionism, Captain. At least the Empire is honest about its nature. The words struck harder than Steve wanted to admit. America hadn't been perfect. He knew that. But it had been something worth fighting for, worth believing in. The promise of what it could become, not just what it was. There's a difference between being flawed and being evil, Steve said quietly. A distinction the billions living under Imperial rule would find meaningless. Spock turned to Moreau. Prepare him for enhanced interrogation. The Emperor wants to know everything about the serum's creation, Stark's technology, and the Tesseract's capabilities. Use whatever methods necessary. Wait, Steve said, but Spock was already leaving. Moreau's smile returned, colder than before. Don't worry, Captain. We've perfected the art of extracting information. You'll tell us everything. Eventually, the technicians activated new instruments. Steve felt the energy manacles tighten, pulling his arms apart. Pain receptors in his nervous system began firing as neural scanners locked onto his brain patterns. He gritted his teeth, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him flinch. Through the pain, through the clinical efficiency of their torture, one thought kept him anchored. He'd survived the Nazis. He'd survive this. And when the opportunity came, he'd find a way to fight back. The Empire might rule the stars, but Steve Rogers had never learned how to surrender. Even here, 3 centuries from home, that hadn't changed. The transport ship shuddered as it detached from Sigma-7's docking clamps. Steve remained in his restraints, flanked by 6 guards in the prisoner hold. His shield sat in a containment field across the compartment, its vibranium surface reflecting the harsh overhead lights. Through the viewport, the station receded into the starfield, replaced by the vast emptiness of space. Commander Moreau had spent 6 hours attempting to break him. Neural scanners, chemical interrogation, even old-fashioned physical coercion. Steve's enhanced metabolism had fought off most of the drugs, and his training, combined with sheer stubborn will, had kept him from revealing anything useful about the serum or the Tesseract, but he'd learned plenty from them. The Empire was vast, but not invincible. Resistance cells operated throughout the quadrant, constantly sabotaging supply lines and freeing prisoners. The Empire responded with overwhelming force, destroying entire colonies as examples. It was a war of attrition, and the Empire was winning. Prisoner Transport 7-4 to ISS Retribution. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. ETA to flagship, 40 minutes. Retribution. Steve didn't like the sound of that. If Sigma-7's interrogation had been preparatory, whatever waited aboard the Empire's flagship would be far worse. He tested his restraints again, feeling the energy fields bite into his wrists. The manacles were designed to contain beings far stronger than him. Breaking free would require either a massive power surge or the ship lurched violently. Alarms screamed. Red emergency lighting flooded the hold as the artificial gravity fluctuated, sending unsecured equipment floating. One of the guards slammed into the bulkhead, his weapon clattering away. The others struggled to maintain their footing as the ship spiraled. "We're hit!" the pilot shouted. "Unknown attackers! Small craft! They came out of nowhere!" An explosion rocked the stern. The viewport cracked, force fields automatically engaging to prevent decompression. Through the damaged, transparent steel, Steve glimpsed 3 small ships, barely larger than fighters, darting around the transport with impossible agility. They were mismatched, cobbled together from different technologies, but their weapons fire was precise and coordinated. The transport's defensive systems returned fire, but the attackers were already gone, banking away in patterns no Imperial pilot would use. Unpredictable, desperate, effective, another impact. The lights died completely, replaced by the dim glow of emergency systems. Steve felt his restraints flicker, their power supply interrupted. He pulled hard, felt the energy fields strain, then fail. His hands were free. The guards realized too late. Steve moved through the chaotic darkness like a shadow, using the ship's violent movements to his advantage. He caught the nearest guard's arm, redirected a phaser shot into the ceiling, then delivered a precise strike to the man's temple. The guard dropped. 2 more rushed him. Steve ducked under a wild swing, drove his fist into one guard's solar plexus, then used the man's body as a shield against the second guard's phaser fire. The energy bolt struck his unconscious comrade, and Steve closed the distance before the shooter could fire again. A quick combination, jab, cross, uppercut, and the second guard fell. The remaining guards hesitated, suddenly uncertain. In close quarters, against an opponent who moved like water and struck like thunder, their advanced weapons meant nothing. Steve didn't give them time to reconsider. He swept through them with brutal efficiency, each movement economical and precise. Within 30 seconds, all 6 guards were unconscious or incapacitated. He retrieved his shield from the containment field, the familiar weight settling against his forearm like an old friend. The ship shuddered again, and through the viewport, Steve saw one of the attacking craft latch onto the transport's hull with magnetic grapples. A cutting torch ignited, blue, white, and brilliant. Someone was breaching the ship. Steve positioned himself by the hold's entrance, shield raised, ready for whatever came through. Friend or enemy, he'd be prepared. The hull peeled back with a shriek of tortured metal. Atmosphere vented in a rush before emergency force fields sealed the breach. 3 figures dropped through the opening, silhouetted against the stars beyond. The first was a woman, human, battle-scarred, wearing mismatched armor that had seen heavy use. She carried a modified phaser rifle and moved with military precision. The second was an Andorian, blue-skinned with antennae, wielding twin disruptors and radiating controlled aggression. The third figure made Steve pause. He was Vulcan, unmistakably so, but different from Spock. Where the Imperial officer had been coldly calculating, this Vulcan moved with almost predatory grace. His uniform was a patchwork of stolen Imperial gear and alien technology. A goatee marked his face, and his eyes held something Steve hadn't expected to see in this universe: intelligence, purpose, and something that might have been compassion, buried deep. "Captain Rogers," the Vulcan said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We don't have much time. Imperial reinforcements will arrive in approximately 4.3 minutes. "Who are you?" Steve demanded, shield still raised. "My name is Spock, but not the Spock you met on the station." He gestured to his companions. "This is Lieutenant Marlena Akers and Commander Schraz. We represent a faction your empire is desperate to eliminate, the Resistance." "You're rebels," Steve said. "We prefer freedom fighters, but yes." The woman, Akers, moved to the viewport, checking their position. "The Empire's been broadcasting your capture across all channels. enhanced human from Earth's past, survived impossible odds, single-handedly took down a security team. They're calling you a threat, which makes you valuable to us, Shras added, his antennae twitching with anticipation. The Resistance needs symbols, inspiration, someone who represents what humanity could be instead of what it's become. I'm not a symbol, Steve said. I'm a soldier. Then soldier with us. Spock met Steve's gaze directly. I've studied the historical records of your era. You fought against fascism when your world faced its darkest hour. The galaxy faces the same darkness now, expanded across 1,000 worlds. We are outnumbered, outgunned, and losing ground every day. So why should I believe you're any better than them? Because we don't claim to be perfect. We simply believe that sentient beings deserve the right to choose their own destiny. Spock paused. And because the alternative is allowing the Empire to replicate your serum and create an army of enhanced soldiers to crush every remaining free world in this quadrant. The transport shuddered again. Warning klaxons indicated incoming ships. Decide now, Captain, Akers urged. Come with us and fight, or stay and become the Empire's weapon. Either way, we're leaving in 30 seconds. Steve looked at each of them. The scarred human veteran, the fierce Andorian warrior, the rebel Vulcan who somehow felt more human than his Imperial counterpart. Then he looked at his shield, at the star in its center, and remembered what it meant. Not perfection, not blind patriotism. The will to stand against tyranny wherever it arose, whatever form it took. Let's go, Steve said. When you see wrong in the world, you plant yourself like a tree and tell the whole world, no, you move. Then welcome to the Resistance, Captain Rogers, Spock said. Now let's move before the Empire makes this entire discussion academic. They evacuated through the breach as Imperial warships dropped out of warp, their weapons already charging. The real war was about to begin. The Resistance base was carved into an asteroid deep in the Mutara sector, a region of space so dense with cosmic dust and ionized nebulae that Imperial sensors couldn't penetrate it. Steve followed Spock through narrow tunnels lit by bioluminescent panels scavenged from a dozen different technologies. The air was thin but breathable, recycled through jury-rigged life support systems that hummed and rattled with every cycle. They emerged into a massive central cavern that had been converted into a command center. Holographic displays floated above makeshift consoles, showing Imperial fleet movements, supply routes, and target assessments. Personnel moved between stations, humans, Vulcans, Andorians, Tellarites, and species Steve didn't recognize. Some wore partial uniforms from their former lives. Others dressed in whatever they could salvage. What struck Steve most was the atmosphere, not desperation, though he saw that too, but determination. These people had chosen to fight against impossible odds because the alternative was slavery. He understood that completely. Welcome to Firebase Tango, Akers said, leading him toward the command center. Population, 417 as of this morning, down from 490 last week. What happened? Steve asked. Imperial raid on our safe house in the Rigel system. They executed everyone they caught, broadcasted across all frequencies as a warning. Her jaw tightened. Didn't work. We picked up 32 new recruits in the aftermath. A woman stood at the central tactical display, her back to them. She was tall, dark-skinned, wearing a commander's jacket that had seen better days. When she turned, Steve saw the weight of command in her eyes, the look of someone who'd sent people to die and learned to live with it. Commander Uhura, Spock said. I've brought Captain Rogers. Nyota Uhura studied Steve with the appraising gaze of a combat veteran. The super soldier from the past. The Empire's calling you their greatest security breach in 5 years. Kirk's obsessed. He's diverted 3 cruisers to hunt for you. I didn't ask to be here, Steve replied. None of us did, but here we are. She gestured to the displays. We've been fighting the Empire for 6 years. Small victories, mostly. Freed some prisoners, destroyed some supplies, inspired some uprisings. But we're losing. For every ship we damage, they build 3 more. For every colony we liberate, they crush 2 others as punishment. Another figure approached from the shadows. A stocky man with graying hair and engineer's coveralls stained with plasma burns. He carried a toolkit and what looked like a bottle of scotch. Montgomery Scott, the man introduced himself with a thick Scottish accent. Chief engineer, such as it is. Heard ye gave a squad of Imperial Guards a proper thrashing. Glad to have ye aboard. Steve Rogers. They shook hands. You're all using Imperial technology against them? Aye, what we can steal or salvage. Imperial ships are designed to be serviced at massive starbases. Our advantage is improvisation. We make do with what we have. Scotty grinned. Drives their engineers mad. Uhura pulled up a new display, a planetary system with multiple installations marked in red. Denver colony. Population, 2 million, mostly human with significant Vulcan and Andorian minorities. The Empire's been using it as a labor camp for 3 years, producing dilithium crystals for their war machine. Conditions are brutal. Life expectancy for workers is 18 months. You want to liberate it, Steve said. We want to try. Uhura zoomed in on a massive orbital platform. The problem is this, a garrison station with enough firepower to slag the entire planet. We hit the colony, they'll kill everyone and blame us for forcing their hand. They've done it before. Steve studied the tactical situation, his mind automatically calculating approach vectors, defensive positions, and vulnerable points. What's your strike capability? 6 ships, all light cruisers or smaller, Spock replied. Against a garrison with 3 capital ships and orbital weapons platforms, direct assault is illogical. The probability of success is less than 12%. Then we don't do a direct assault, Steve pointed to the display. The Empire rules through fear and overwhelming force. They expect resistance to behave a certain way, hit and run, guerrilla tactics, avoidance of direct confrontation. What if we give them something they're not expecting? Uhura leaned forward. I'm listening. Small team, ground insertion, while their attention is focused elsewhere. The garrison's defenses are pointed outward, watching for ships. But if we can get inside the camp, organize the prisoners, turn 2 million workers into 2 million fighters simultaneously. A prison break from the inside, Akers said, understanding dawning. But how do we get past the orbital defenses? Scotty's eyes lit up. A transport. Imperial prison transports arrive weekly. If we could capture one, reprogram its identification codes. We'd be flagged the moment we deviated from the flight plan, Shraz countered. Not if we don't deviate, Steve said. We play it straight. Land where we're supposed to land. Dock where we're supposed to dock. By the time they realize something's wrong, we're already inside their perimeter. Spock raised an eyebrow. Assuming we successfully infiltrate the camp, coordinate 2 million untrained civilians, and overcome Imperial security forces, we still face the garrison's orbital weapons. The moment they realize what's happening, they'll fire on the colony. Which is why we need to take out the garrison's targeting systems first, Steve replied. A simultaneous strike. Ground team liberates the prisoners while your ships hit the garrison's sensor arrays. Blind them, even for 30 minutes, and we can evacuate significant numbers before they recover. Evacuate to where? Uhura asked. We don't have transport capacity for 2 million people. We don't need to evacuate everyone, just enough to prove it's possible. Show the galaxy that the Empire can be beaten, that their prison worlds aren't invulnerable. Every person we free becomes a symbol, a recruiter, proof that resistance isn't futile. The command center had gone quiet. Personnel at nearby stations had stopped working, listening to the exchange. "It's a suicide mission," Uhura said flatly. "It's a necessary mission," Steve countered. "You said it yourself. You're losing. Playing it safe isn't working. Sometimes you have to take a risk that scares you, bet everything on one moment, because it's the only chance you have to change the game." Uhura looked at Spock. "Analysis? Captain Rogers' strategy is tactically sound, but strategically reckless. Success probability increases to approximately 34%, but failure would result in catastrophic loss of life and a devastating blow to resistance morale." Spock paused. "However, maintaining our current trajectory guarantees defeat. The captain is correct. We must change the paradigm." "Scotty?" Uhura asked. "I can reprogram a transport's ID codes, Getting one will be the trick. Imperial transport convoy passes through the Argalia system in 4 days," Akers reported, checking intelligence feeds. "Minimum security, rotating crew. It's doable." Uhura studied the tactical display for a long moment, then looked at Steve. "You've been in this universe less than a day, Captain Rogers. You don't owe us anything." "I owe it to myself," Steve replied. "I didn't survive falling through dimensions just to hide in an asteroid. If there are people suffering under tyranny, people who need help, then that's exactly where I belong." A slow smile crossed Uhura's face. "Commander Spock, assemble a strike team. Captain Rogers, you'll lead the ground insertion. Scotty, prepare to capture that transport. Akers, I want detailed intelligence on Denova's layout, guard rotations, power systems, everything." "Ma'am," Shraz interjected, "the Council won't approve this. They'll say it's too aggressive, too risky." "Then it's fortunate I'm not asking for their approval." Uhura's voice carried the steel of absolute command. "We've spent 6 years bleeding slow. Time to make the Empire bleed fast." Dismissed. As personnel scattered to their tasks, Spock approached Steve. "Your presence has changed the equation, Captain. The Resistance has been reactive for too long. You think like a soldier, not a survivor." "There's a difference?" Steve asked. "Indeed. Survivors seek to avoid death. Soldiers seek to achieve victory." Spock's expression was unreadable. "Let us hope your philosophy proves effective. Many lives depend on it." Steve looked at his shield, then back at the Resistance fighters preparing for the most dangerous operation they'd ever attempted. He'd fought in World War II, knowing every mission might be his last. 3 centuries later, nothing had changed. Except this time, the whole galaxy was at stake. The Imperial transport convoy emerged from warp on schedule, 3 ships in tight formation crossing the neutral zone between Argelius II and the Mutara sector. Steve watched from the cramped cockpit of a modified scout ship, its hull plating reconfigured to minimize sensor signatures. Beside him, Akers piloted with the steady hands of someone who'd flown 1,000 dangerous missions. "Target acquired," she murmured. "Middle transport, registry number NCC 4711, crew complement 8, prisoner capacity 200, currently carrying 63 detainees bound for Deneva labor camp." "How do we separate it from the convoy?" Steve asked. "We don't. Scotty does." Akers activated the comm. "Chief, you're up. 3,000 kilometers ahead, a subspace relay station, supposedly abandoned, flickered to life." Scotty's voice crackled through on Imperial frequencies. "Imperial Transport NCC 4711. This is Relay Station Gamma 7. We're detecting a critical malfunction in your antimatter containment field. Recommend immediate diagnostic and repair. Divert to these coordinates for emergency maintenance." The convoy commander's response was immediate. "Gamma 7, our systems show no malfunction. Maintain course." "Negative, transport. We're reading a 0.03% fluctuation in your magnetic constriction segments. If that field fails at warp, you'll take the whole convoy with ye." Regulations require immediate shutdown and inspection. A pause. Steve could almost hear the convoy commander weighing options. Ignore the warning and risk catastrophic failure, or follow protocol and delay the mission. In the Empire, failure was punished severely. Better to be cautious than dead. Acknowledged. Gamma 7. NCC 4711, braking formation for diagnostics. The middle transport peeled away, dropping out of warp near the relay station. The other two continued their course, disappearing into the starfield. Akers gunned the engines, bringing their scout ship alongside the transport's port side, hidden in its sensor shadow. "Magnetize and breach," Steve ordered. The scout ship latched onto the transport's hull with magnetic grapples. Scotty's team had already disabled the external sensors on this section, a blind spot the Imperials didn't know they had. Steve pulled on a salvaged EVA suit, checked the seals, and grabbed his shield. Shraz and two other resistance fighters prepared beside him. The airlock cycled. Steve stepped into the void. Space was silent and vast, the stars cold and indifferent. He mag-locked his boots to the transport's hull and moved toward the maintenance hatch Scotty had identified. Shraz carried a plasma cutter, igniting it with a blue-white flare that seemed impossibly bright against the darkness. The hull peeled back. Atmosphere vented in a crystalline fog before emergency force fields engaged. Steve dropped through into a maintenance corridor, shield raised, scanning for threats. Empty. The team followed, sealing the breach behind them. They moved through the ship's service passages, avoiding the main corridors where crew would be stationed. Steve's enhanced hearing picked up conversations through the bulkheads, guards complaining about the delay, prisoners sobbing in the hold, the hum of the warp core cycling down for diagnostics. They reached the bridge deck. Shraz planted shaped charges on the door. Imperial technology turned against its makers. Steve positioned himself at the breach point, counting down silently. 3, 2, 1. The charges detonated with a focused blast that sheared through the reinforced door. Steve was moving before the smoke cleared, shield deflecting phaser fire from the startled crew. He crossed the bridge in 4 strides, slamming his shield into the security officer's weapon before the man could adjust his aim. The tactical officer reached for an alarm, but Shraz was faster, his disruptor stunning the woman before her hand reached the panel. 8 crew members. 30 seconds, all incapacitated, without a single fatality. "Bridge secure," Steve reported into his comm. Akers brought the scout ship around, docking with the transport's main airlock. Scotty rushed onto the bridge, immediately interfacing with the command console. "Right. Let's see what we've got. Imperial registry codes, current authentication protocols, command overrides." His fingers flew across the controls. "Oh, that's beautiful. They haven't updated their encryption in 6 months. Lazy bastards." "How long to reprogram?" Steve asked. "Give me 10 minutes, and I'll make this ship think it's the Emperor's personal yacht." Steve moved to the prisoner hold, Shraz beside him. The detained aliens, Vulcans, Andorians, a few humans who'd presumably committed the crime of dissent, looked up with hollow eyes as Steve opened the cell force fields. "We're with the Resistance," Steve said. "You're free, but we need your help." An older Vulcan stepped forward, her face weathered but unbowed. "What do you require?" "We're infiltrating Deneva colony to liberate the prisoners. When we arrive, you'll need to act as though you're still captives. Once we're inside the garrison, we'll move together. Can you do that?" The Vulcan studied him with the piercing gaze of someone who'd survived Imperial brutality and refused to break. "To free 2 million souls, we will do whatever is necessary." "Good." Steve turned to the others. "Anyone here have military or combat experience?" 5 hands raised, including the Vulcan woman's. "Then you're with me on the ground team. The rest will help coordinate the evacuation once we secure the landing zone." Scotty's voice echoed through the ship's intercom. "Transport reprogrammed. As far as Imperial Control knows, we're NCC 4711 with authentic crew and prisoner manifest. We'll pass any standard security check, but if they do a deep scan or request visual confirmation of the bridge crew, then we better make sure they don't, Akers said, joining them in the hold. She'd changed into an Imperial uniform stripped from an unconscious crew member. It fit poorly, but from a distance, she'd pass. I'll handle communications. Spock's already moving the fleet into position. Once we're on the ground, they'll hit the garrison's sensor arrays. We'll have 30 minutes before Imperial reinforcements arrive from Sector Command. 30 minutes to organize and evacuate 2 million people, Shraz said. Impossible. We don't need to evacuate everyone, Steve replied. Just prove it can be done. Show every prisoner in the Empire that the walls can come down. The ship's engines hummed as Scotty brought systems online. Through the viewport, the relay station receded, and ahead, Deneva's yellow sun grew brighter. 4 hours to Deneva orbit, Akers reported. Once we commit to atmospheric entry, there's no turning back. The garrison will have weapons locked on us the entire descent. Steve checked his shield, tested its magnetic lock. The vibranium caught the light, its star emblem gleaming. In his time, that star had represented a nation's ideals. Here, it would represent something larger, the idea that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the odds, no matter the era. Then we better get it right the first time, he said. The transport jumped to warp, carrying them toward the most dangerous mission any of them had attempted. Behind them, the Resistance fleet began its silent approach, 6 ships against an empire that spanned 67 star systems. In the prisoner hold, the freed captives prepared themselves mentally for what came next. The Vulcan woman approached Steve, her expression grave. "You are the one they speak of," she said. "The soldier from Earth's past. They say you fought tyranny when your world faced its darkest hour." "I did what needed to be done," Steve replied. "Then you understand what we face. The Empire does not forgive. If we fail, they will make examples of us that will echo across 1,000 worlds. And if we succeed..." The Vulcan allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile, an expression her people rarely showed. "Then perhaps hope is not as illogical as I believed." Steve returned the smile. "Hope's not about logic. It's about believing you can make a difference even when everything tells you that you can't." "Then let us make a difference, Captain Rogers. For the 2 million souls awaiting liberation, and for the billions more watching to see if freedom is still possible." The transport hurtled through space toward Deneva, carrying a soldier who'd fought Nazis in 1945 to fight fascism in 2026-70. The century had changed. The weapons had changed. The scale had changed. But the cause remained the same. And Steve Rogers had never learned how to quit. Deneva hung in space like a bruised jewel, a world of deep oceans and scattered continents, beautiful from orbit but scarred by Imperial exploitation. The garrison station loomed above it, a massive construct bristling with weapons platforms and sensor arrays. Steve watched through the transport's viewport as they approached, every muscle coiled with anticipation. "Imperial control to transport NCC 4711, a bored voice crackled through the comm. "Transmit authorization codes and manifest." Akers leaned over the communications console, her Imperial uniform properly adjusted now. "Control, this is NCC 4711, transmitting codes now. Prisoner manifest, 63 detainees for labor assignment, classification Delta 7. A pause. Steve's hand tightened on his shield. If the codes failed, if even one authentication protocol was outdated, the garrison's weapons would vaporize them before they could react. "Codes accepted. 4711. You're cleared for landing pad 7. Maintain approach vector and submit to tractor beam guidance." The transport shuddered as the invisible beam locked onto them, pulling the ship toward the planet's surface. Through the viewport, Steve watched the garrison station slide past, close enough to see individual weapon ports tracking their descent, each one capable of reducing the transport to atoms. "We're committed," Scotty said quietly from the engineering station. "No turning back now." The transport entered Denver's atmosphere, shaking as it descended through layers of ionized air. Below, the labor camp sprawled across a former city, kilometers of converted buildings surrounded by force field perimeters and guard towers. Steve counted at least 20 visible security stations, each manned by armed Imperial soldiers. 2 million prisoners lived and died down there, mining dilithium crystals in conditions that would kill unenhanced humans within months. Today, that changed. The transport touched down on landing pad 7 with a pneumatic hiss. Through the viewport, Steve saw Imperial security teams approaching, 12 soldiers in full tactical gear, weapons ready. Standard procedure for prisoner transfers. "Remember," Steve said to the freed prisoners who'd been resecured in their cells per the plan, "you're still captives until I give the signal. Act defeated, keep your heads down, and when the moment comes, fight like hell." The Vulcan woman, she'd identified herself as Tapana, nodded. "We understand, Captain. We will not fail." The transport's rear hatch opened. Imperial Sergeant Kovar marched up the ramp, his face set in the perpetual scowl of a man who enjoyed his authority. "Transport crew, report to processing. Prisoners will be transferred to Holding Section Gamma for assignment." Akers stepped forward, datapad in hand, playing her role perfectly. "Sergeant, we had a mechanical issue en route. Engineering will need to inspect the antimatter containment before we can—" Kovar waved dismissively. "Not my concern. Processing handles crew issues. Move the prisoners now." Steve remained hidden in the cargo section with Shraz and the assault team. Through a gap in the bulkhead, he watched Imperial guards enter the prisoner hold, their weapons set to heavy stun. They moved with casual brutality, shoving prisoners toward the exit. Tapana stumbled deliberately, falling to one knee. A guard kicked her. "Move, Vulcan scum!" Steve's jaw clenched. Not yet. Timing was everything. The prisoners shuffled down the ramp in chains, surrounded by Imperial security. Akers and the crew were escorted toward a processing building. The transport sat relatively isolated on the landing pad, exactly as planned. Most of the camp's security forces were positioned around the perimeter and the mining operations, not the arrival zone. Steve's comm buzzed with Spock's voice. "Captain, Resistance fleet is in position, awaiting your signal." "Stand by," Steve whispered. The last prisoner cleared the transport. The Imperial guards began their standard security sweep, checking the hold, scanning for contraband, ensuring no one remained aboard. 2 guards entered the cargo section. They never saw Steve coming. He moved like a shadow, shield deflecting one guard's phaser blast into the ceiling before the man could properly aim. The second guard managed half a shout before Steve's fist connected with his jaw. Both went down silently. "Go," Steve ordered. The assault team poured out of hiding. Shraz, 4 freed prisoners with combat training, and Scotty carrying a pack of demolition charges. They moved across the landing pad in tactical formation, using the transport as cover. The exterior guards were focused on the prisoner column, not the ship behind them. Steve reached the nearest guard tower, a prefabricated structure 20 feet high with overlapping fields of fire. The guard inside was scanning the horizon, watching for external threats, not expecting danger from within the camp. Steve threw his shield. It struck the tower's support beam with a metallic clang, ricocheted upward through the observation window, struck the guard unconscious, and bounced off 2 interior walls before returning to Steve's arm. The whole sequence took 3 seconds and made less noise than a dropped tool. "Tower 1 secure," he whispered into the comm. Shraz scaled the structure with Andorian agility, accessing the guard's control panel. "Disabling Sector 7 force fields. You have 60 seconds before the main security grid registers the anomaly." Steve sprinted toward the prisoner column. The Imperial guards were herding Tapana and the others toward a processing gate. He closed the distance, shield low, moving between equipment crates and parked vehicles. 50 feet, 30, 20. A guard turned, saw him, opened his mouth to shout. Steve's shield struck him in the chest, knocking him backward. The other guards spun, weapons rising, but Tapana was already moving. Her Vulcan strength allowed her to snap the energy manacles binding her wrists. She grabbed the nearest guard's phaser, redirected it into his commander, then tossed it to another freed prisoner. Chaos erupted. The prisoners attacked their captors with the desperate fury of people who had nothing left to lose. Imperial training met desperation, and for a critical moment, desperation won. Steve waded into the fight, his shield deflecting phaser fire, his fists delivering precise strikes that dropped guards without killing them. He didn't want to kill them, but he would stop them. "All resistance forces, execute now," Steve shouted into his comm. In orbit, Spock's fleet dropped their cloaking fields and opened fire on the garrison station's sensor arrays. Photon torpedoes and disruptor beams hammered the station's external systems. Alarms shrieked across the camp as the garrison's tactical network went blind. "Security breach in Landing Zone 7, someone shouted over Imperial frequencies. "All units respond. Prisoners are escaping." But it was already too late. Scotty's demolition charges detonated simultaneously across 4 guard towers, collapsing them in controlled explosions that created gaps in the security perimeter. Force fields flickered and died as he'd overloaded the local power grid. The Resistance assault team stormed processing buildings, freeing prisoners by the hundreds. And Steve Rogers stood in the center of the landing zone, shield raised, as Imperial reinforcements poured toward him from every direction. He'd been in this position before, outnumbered, outgunned, facing impossible odds. In France, in Germany, in a dozen battlefields across Europe, he'd learned that sometimes one person standing their ground could change everything. "Prisoners of Denver," he shouted, his voice carrying across the chaos. "The Empire has kept you in chains, worked you to death, told you that resistance was futile. But today, we're proving them wrong. Today you fight back. Today, you're free." A roar rose from the labor camp. 2 million voices finding hope for the first time in years. The Battle of Denver had begun, and Captain America had just started a revolution. The Imperial response was swift and overwhelming. Guard units converged on the landing zone from 3 directions, their training kicking in despite the chaos. Phaser fire lit up the compound like a deadly light show, energy bolts crossing the space where prisoners scattered for cover. Steve moved through the storm of weapons fire, shield angled to protect the unarmed prisoners scrambling behind him. A phaser blast struck the vibranium dead center. The energy dissipated harmlessly, but the impact sent vibrations up his arm. These weren't the weak sidearms from the transport. These were heavy military-grade weapons. "Tapana!" Steve shouted. "Get them to the mining tunnels, underground, away from orbital bombardment!" The Vulcan woman was already organizing prisoners into groups, her logic cutting through their panic. "Section leaders, establish rally points at tunnel entrances Delta through Gamma. Medical personnel, triage the injured at secondary positions." Steve admired her efficiency even as he threw his shield at an advancing squad. It struck 3 guards in rapid succession before ricocheting off a transport's hull and returning to his arm. The guards went down, their armor dented but not penetrated. He wasn't trying to kill them, just stop them, but the Empire had no such compunctions. A disruptor beam vaporized the ground 3 feet from a fleeing child, a young Andorian girl, maybe 8 years old, her antennae trembling with terror. Steve reached her in 2 bounds, scooping her up and rolling behind a cargo container as more fire raked their position. "I've got you," he said quietly. "You're safe." She stared at him with wide eyes, then buried her face against his shoulder. A massive explosion rocked the western perimeter. Scotty's voice crackled through Steve's comm over the sound of weapons fire. "Captain, I've breached the armory. We've got Imperial weapons stores, phasers, disruptors, photon grenades, distributing to anyone who can shoot." "Negative," Steve countered. "Arm only those with combat experience. Everyone else focuses on evacuation. We're not trying to win a firefight, we're buying time. Against these odds, lad, we'll need every gun we can muster." Steve set the Andorian child down behind solid cover, pointing her toward Tapana's evacuation route. "Go, run, and don't look back." She ran. An Imperial officer emerged from a command bunker, flanked by a full platoon. His uniform marked him as a captain, career military, decorated, dangerous. He raised a hand, and his troops formed a firing line with mechanical precision. "Insurgents, surrender immediately or face summary execution." Steve stepped into the open, shield raised. "These people aren't insurgents. They're prisoners you've enslaved, and I'm giving you one chance to stand down before this gets worse." The captain laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You're the anomaly, the primitive from Earth's past. Captain Rogers, isn't it? The Emperor has offered a significant reward for your capture." He drew his sidearm, a custom disruptor that hummed with barely contained power. "But I think a body will suffice." He fired. Steve angled his shield. The disruptor beam hit the vibranium at a 45-degree angle and reflected directly back at the captain. The officer barely managed to dive aside as his own shot scorched the ground where he'd been standing. "Physics lesson," Steve said. "What you shoot at me tends to come back." The platoon opened fire. Steve moved, using the shield to deflect shots while closing the distance. The guards were well trained, but they'd been fighting unarmed prisoners for years. They'd forgotten how to fight someone who fought back with skill and determination. He was among them in seconds. Shield strike to the first guard's weapon, sending it flying. Leg sweep to the second, who went down hard. Elbow to the third guard's solar plexus. The fourth guard managed to land a glancing blow with a shock baton, electricity crackling across Steve's ribs, but his enhanced metabolism shrugged off most of the effect. He grabbed the baton, twisted it from the guard's grip, and used it to disable two more soldiers. The captain scrambled backward, firing wildly. Steve deflected each shot with precise shield angles, then hurled the shield in a wide arc. It struck the captain's disruptor, ricocheted off a support beam, hit three more guards, and returned as Steve caught it without breaking stride. "Last warning," Steve said, standing over the captain. "Stand down." The captain spat at Steve's feet. "The Empire doesn't surrender to primitives. Then you're going to have a very bad day." A massive shadow passed overhead. Steve looked up to see a Klingon bird of prey decloaking, not Imperial, but bearing the Resistance's improvised markings. Its weapons weren't firing at the camp, but at the garrison station above. Spock's voice came through on open frequencies. "All Imperial forces, your orbital weapons platforms are disabled. Surrender your positions, or we will target your command structures." The captain's face went pale. Without orbital support, the garrison was vulnerable, but years of Imperial conditioning overrode tactical sense. "All units, converge on the landing zone. Kill the prisoners if you must, but capture Rogers alive." That was the moment Steve realized negotiation was over. Shras appeared from the armory with a dozen armed former prisoners. Andorians, Vulcans, even a few humans who'd been Imperial soldiers before they'd questioned orders. "Captain, we have 300 prisoners armed and trained. Where do you need us?" "Form a perimeter around the evacuation tunnels. Anyone who wants to fight, fights. Anyone who wants to flee, we protect them while they do. No one gets left behind." "Understood." Akers sprinted across the compound, her stolen uniform scorched and torn. "Steve, we've got a problem. The garrison commander is threatening to activate the planetary defense grid. He's saying if we don't surrender in 10 minutes, he'll fire on the camp from orbit. 2 million people, vaporized. Steve's blood ran cold. "He's bluffing," The Empire wouldn't destroy their own labor force. He's not bluffing. A new voice, calm and logical, came from behind them. Steve turned to find Spock materializing from a transporter beam, accompanied by 2 Resistance fighters. But this wasn't the Resistance Spock he'd met earlier. This was the other one, the Imperial officer from the station, Commander Spock of the Terran Empire, and he was holding a phaser aimed directly at Steve's chest. "Commander Spock," Akers breathed, raising her weapon. "Lower your weapon, Lieutenant," Imperial Spock said without taking his eyes off Steve. "I am not here as your enemy, at least not in the conventional sense." "Then why are you here?" Steve asked, shield raised but not attacking. "Because I have spent the past 4 days analyzing your tactical patterns, Captain Rogers. Your strategies, your moral framework, your refusal to accept defeat even when logic suggests surrender." Spock's expression was unreadable. "And I have concluded something that disturbs me greatly." "What's that?" "That you may be correct. That the Empire's methodology, while efficient, is fundamentally flawed." He lowered his phaser slightly. "I have come to offer you information in exchange for a philosophical discussion I believe we must have before more lives are lost." Steve studied the Vulcan. Every instinct told him this was a trap. But something in Spock's eyes, a conflict, a question, a crack in his Imperial certainty, suggested otherwise. "What information?" Steve asked. "The garrison commander is indeed prepared to fire on this camp. But more significantly, Emperor Kirk is en route with the ISS Enterprise and a battle fleet. They will arrive in 47 minutes. When they do, everyone on this planet, resistance, prisoners, and even Imperial forces, will be considered expendable in Kirk's pursuit of you." The compound fell silent, except for distant weapons fire and the rumble of ships overhead. "Why tell me this?" Steve demanded. Spock holstered his phaser. "Because I wish to understand why a man from a primitive era with no stake in this century's conflicts would risk everything for people he does not know. It is illogical, yet effective. That paradox interests me." "It's not about logic," Steve said. "It's about doing what's right." Define right in a universe where morality is subjective and survival is paramount. Steve lowered his shield. "We can debate philosophy after we save 2 million lives. Are you helping us or not?" Spock raised an eyebrow. "Fascinating. You would trust an Imperial officer based solely on his words?" "No. I'm trusting that you came here asking questions instead of shooting. That means part of you already knows the answer." For the first time, Imperial Spock's mask cracked, revealing something that might have been respect. "Very well, Captain. Let us test your philosophy against the Empire's pragmatism. We have 47 minutes to evacuate as many prisoners as possible before the Emperor arrives. I suggest we stop debating and start working." The unlikely alliance formed in seconds. Imperial Spock accessed the garrison's command network with authorization codes the Resistance couldn't crack, disabling internal security protocols and force fields across 3 sectors. Resistance Spock coordinated the evacuation from orbit, directing transport ships to landing zones Scotty's team secured, and Steve Rogers stood at the center of it all, organizing chaos into purpose. "We need more ships," Uhura's voice crackled through the comm from the Resistance flagship. "We've got 400,000 prisoners in the evacuation tunnels and transport capacity for maybe 50,000. Then make multiple trips," Steve replied, directing another group toward a cleared landing pad. "Every person we save is a victory." "Not enough time," Imperial Spock stated, monitoring a tactical display. "Emperor Kirk's fleet will arrive in 41 minutes. His battle group includes the ISS Enterprise, 3 Constitution-class cruisers, and 2 squadrons of attack fighters. Once they achieve orbital superiority, all surface-to-space traffic will be interdicted." Then we expand the perimeter, Steve said. Scotty, can you disable the garrison's tractor beams? Aye, if you give me 10 minutes and don't mind a few explosions. Do it. Shraz, take your team and secure landing pads 8 through 12. We need more touchdown zones. Akers appeared, her face grim. Steve, we've got a situation at Tunnel Delta. Imperial loyalists, guards who'd rather die than surrender, have taken hostages. 30 prisoners, mostly children. They're demanding safe passage off-world, or they start executing them. Steve's jaw clenched. Where? Administrative building, 3rd level. Fortified position, heavy weapons. I'll handle it. He turned to Imperial Spock. Can you maintain the evacuation coordination? I am capable of multitasking, Captain. However, I should point out that negotiating with the hostage-takers would be more efficient than a rescue attempt. Their demands are reasonable given their circumstances. Their circumstances are that they're threatening to murder children to save themselves, Steve countered. There's no negotiating with that. A moral absolute. How human. Spock's expression was unreadable. Interesting that you distinguish between necessary violence against armed combatants and unnecessary violence against innocents. Most humans I have encountered do not maintain such clear ethical boundaries under stress. Most humans you've encountered have been Imperials, Steve replied, already moving toward the administrative building. There's a difference. He crossed the compound at a run, shield locked to his arm. The building loomed ahead, a 3-story structure of reinforced duranium, designed to withstand orbital bombardment. The windows had been blown out, replaced with force fields and defensive positions. Steve counted at least 6 guards visible, all armed with disruptor rifles. The comm channel opened, a harsh voice filled with desperate anger. Attention, insurgents! We have 30 prisoners. Every 10 minutes you delay our departure, we execute 5. The first 5 die in 8 minutes. Do not test our resolve. Steve reached the building's ground floor. The main entrance was sealed, but Scotty had taught him a few things about Imperial technology in the past 4 days. He found an access panel, ripped it open, and crossed 2 power conduits. The security lock sparked and died. He slipped inside. The interior was dark, lit only by emergency lighting. Steve moved through corridors designed for bureaucratic efficiency, now transformed into a combat zone. Furniture barricades blocked intersections. Scorch marks from weapons fire decorated the walls. Somewhere above, children were crying. He reached a stairwell, started climbing. His enhanced hearing picked up voices from the 3rd floor. 6 distinct speakers, maybe 7. All nervous, all armed, all cornered animals who'd killed to survive. 2nd floor. The crying was louder now. Steve's hand tightened on his shield. 3rd floor landing. A guard stood watch, his disruptor rifle sweeping the stairwell entrance. Steve waited, timing the guard's patrol pattern. 3 seconds left. 2, 1. The guard turned away. Steve moved like a ghost, crossing the distance in absolute silence. His hand clamped over the guard's mouth while his other arm applied a precise chokehold. The guard struggled for 5 seconds, then went limp. Steve lowered him quietly to the floor. Voices ahead, clearer now. Don't care what that primitive says. The Empire doesn't abandon its soldiers. They'll negotiate. And if they don't? Another voice, younger, terrified. If they just storm the building, then we take as many of them with us as we can. Die like warriors, not prisoners. Steve eased forward until he could see into the main room. The hostages, Vulcan children, Andorian teenagers, human adolescents, huddled in the center, bound with energy restraints. 6 guards surrounded them, weapons trained both on the hostages and the room's entrances. The lead guard was older, a sergeant whose uniform bore commendations from a dozen campaigns. This was a career soldier, not a sadist. Dangerous, because he believed in what he was doing, not because he enjoyed cruelty. 5 minutes. the sergeant said into his comm. Then the first 5 die. You have 5 minutes to provide us with a ship and safe passage, or blood is on your hands. Steve stepped into the doorway, shield raised. You know that's not going to happen. Every weapon swiveled toward him. The sergeant's eyes widened in recognition. Captain Rogers, the anomaly. The name's Steve, and we're going to resolve this without anyone dying. There is no resolution. We're Imperial soldiers. We don't surrender to terrorists, and we don't abandon our posts. Then you're not thinking clearly, Steve replied, taking a careful step forward. Look around you. The garrison's fallen. The resistance controls the camp, and in 35 minutes, your Emperor arrives to destroy everyone, including you, because this situation embarrasses the Empire. You're not defending anything. You're just choosing how you die. At least we die with honor. Honor? Steve's voice carried an edge now. What's honorable about murdering children? You want to go down fighting, fine. But let them go first. Fight me. 6 armed soldiers against 1 man with a shield. You'll have your warrior's death, and they'll have their lives. The sergeant hesitated. The other guards exchanged uncertain glances. You expect us to believe you'd let us attack you? That you wouldn't just strike us down the moment we released them? I'm giving you my word, Steve said. Let them go, and you'll get your fight. Fair and square. Your word means nothing. You're not Imperial. You have no honor we recognize. Then test me. Release 5 hostages as a show of good faith. If I attack, you'll know I'm lying. If I don't, maybe you'll realize I mean what I say. The sergeant studied Steve for a long moment, calculating odds, weighing options. Finally, he gestured to one of his guards. Release 5, the youngest ones. Energy restraints deactivated. 5 children, 2 Vulcan, 2 Andorian, 1 human, stumbled free. They looked at Steve with desperate hope. Go, Steve said softly. Straight down the stairs. Someone will take care of you. They ran. The sergeant's weapon didn't waver from Steve's chest. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, Captain Rogers. Little of both. Steve adjusted his shield. Now release the rest, and we'll finish this. No. The sergeant's finger tightened on the trigger. Because I just realized something. You won't attack while we hold these hostages. Your moral code won't allow it, which means we have the advantage. That's where you're wrong, Steve replied. My moral code says I protect the innocent, and sometimes that means making hard choices. He threw his shield, not at the guards, but at the ceiling above them. The vibranium struck a support beam with calculated force. The ceiling cracked, emergency force fields sparking and failing. Debris rained down. In the chaos, 3 seconds of confusion and dust, Steve moved. He crossed the room faster than the guards could track, shield returning to his arm mid-stride. First guard down with a precise strike to the weapon hand. Second guard's rifle twisted away before he could fire. Third guard managed a shot that Steve deflected into the floor, then disarmed with a shield strike to the solar plexus. The sergeant got off 1 shot, a disruptor beam that grazed Steve's shoulder, burning through his uniform and searing skin. Pain lanced through him, but his enhanced healing was already working. He drove forward, shield absorbing the second shot, then slammed into the sergeant with controlled force that knocked the man backward without breaking bones. 30 seconds, 6 guards down, all hostages safe. Steve stood among the unconscious Imperials, breathing hard, his shoulder bleeding but functional. The children stared at him with awe and terror. It's okay, he said, helping them to their feet. You're safe now. Let's get you out of here. Tapana appeared in the doorway, having followed the released children back. Her eyes took in the scene. The defeated guards, the freed hostages, Steve's injured shoulder, and she raised an eyebrow in the Vulcan expression of impressed restraint. Impressive, Captain. Most humans would have killed them. They were scared and desperate, Steve replied, removing the children's restraints. That doesn't mean they deserve to die. the Empire would not have shown them similar mercy. I know, that's the difference. His comm crackled. Resistant Spock's urgent voice cut through. Captain Rogers, you need to see this. Now. What is it? The Emperor's fleet just dropped out of warp. They're 20 minutes ahead of schedule. Steve's blood ran cold. Can we evacuate? Not in time. Kirk is hailing the planet. He wants to speak with you personally. And Captain, he's activating Project Trident. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Everything they'd fought for, every freed prisoner, every small victory was about to be erased if Steve couldn't find a way to stop the Empire's ultimate weapon. The holographic display materialized in the center of the compound, a massive projection visible across the entire labor camp. Emperor James T. Kirk appeared, seated on a throne of dark metal and alien design, his expression mixing amusement with cold calculation. Behind him, the bridge of the ISS Enterprise stretched into shadows, officers moving with lethal efficiency. Captain Stephen Rogers, Kirk began, his voice amplified to echo across Denver. The man out of time. The primitive who thinks he can challenge an empire spanning 67 star systems. I must admit, you've exceeded expectations. 2 million prisoners liberated, a garrison in chaos, and you've managed to corrupt one of my best officers in the process. Imperial Spock stood beside Steve, his face impassive as Kirk's gaze fixed on him through the transmission. Commander Spock, Kirk continued, I'm disappointed. I expected logic from you, not sentiment. Harboring a fugitive, assisting insurgents, these are capital offenses. When I'm finished with Rogers, we'll discuss your future, or lack thereof. My actions were logical, Emperor, Spock replied evenly. Captain Rogers presented variables that challenged fundamental Imperial assumptions. Investigation was warranted. Investigation? Kirk laughed, a sharp, dangerous sound. You've started a rebellion that will cost millions of lives to suppress, but that's acceptable, because I'm going to use this situation to demonstrate something to the entire galaxy. The display shifted, showing a weapon system Steve had never seen. A massive construct of interlocking energy matrices and exotic matter, suspended in space like a mechanical nightmare. Power readings crawled across the projection, numbers that made even Imperial Spock's eyebrows rise. Project Trident, Kirk announced. 3 years in development, a synthesis of Romulan singularity manipulation, Klingon disruptor technology, and Borg nanoprobe delivery systems. It doesn't just destroy planets, Captain Rogers. It erases them, atomizes every molecule of matter within a planetary diameter. The world simply ceases to exist. Steve's stomach twisted. You'd killed 2 million of your own people? They ceased being my people the moment they rebelled. But I'm not unreasonable. I'll give you a choice. Kirk leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence. Surrender yourself to me within 10 minutes. Beam aboard the Enterprise, alone and unarmed. Do that, and I'll show mercy. I'll merely execute the Resistance leadership and return the prisoners to their labor assignments. Painful, but survivable. And if I refuse, then I activate Trident. Denver becomes an object lesson in what happens when you defy the Empire. 2 million deaths, Captain. Their blood on your hands because you chose principle over pragmatism. The transmission ended. The hologram dissipated, leaving Steve standing in the sudden silence of a compound, holding its breath. He's bluffing, Akers said, but her voice lacked conviction. He's not, Imperial Spock stated. Emperor Kirk is many things, but he does not bluff regarding demonstrations of power. He will fire Trident. The question is whether Captain Rogers' surrender would actually prevent him from doing so. You think he'd fire anyway? Steve asked. I calculate a 73% probability. Kirk sees this situation as an opportunity to eliminate resistance leadership, capture a valuable asset, and demonstrate absolute power simultaneously. Keeping his word would achieve only 2 of 3 objectives. Steve looked at the thousands of freed prisoners filling the compound. The children Tipana was organizing into evacuation groups, the resistance fighters who'd risked everything to fight tyranny. Then he looked at his shield, the symbol he'd carried through 1 war already. "I have to go," he said quietly. "Absolutely not," Akers protested. "It's suicide. It's the only option that might save these people." Might being the operative word. Resistance Spock materialized via transport, his bird of praise signal cutting through Imperial jamming. "Captain, surrender would be tactically inadvisable. Kirk will use you to create super soldiers for the Empire. Everything we've fought for will be turned against us. And if I don't surrender, everyone here dies in the next 8 minutes. Some battles cannot be won, only survived," Resistance Spock said. "We evacuate who we can, scatter the fleet, and continue fighting." "That's not good enough." Imperial Spock spoke, his voice carrying an unusual weight. "Captain Rogers, in the past 4 days, I have observed your tactical decisions, your moral framework, your refusal to accept defeat. I have concluded that the Empire's methodology, while efficient, lacks a critical variable, the capacity to inspire genuine loyalty rather than compel obedience through fear." "Your point?" Steve asked. "My point is that your surrender accomplishes nothing strategically, but everything symbolically. The Resistance needs living heroes, not martyrs." "However," Spock paused, and calculation flickering across his features, "there may be an alternative approach." "I'm listening." "Kirk expects you to surrender or refuse. He has prepared for both scenarios. What he has not prepared for is a direct assault on the Enterprise itself during the Trident activation sequence." Steve's eyes narrowed. "You want to board his flagship during a battle?" "Not during, before. Trident requires a synchronized activation sequence. The weapon must be powered, targeted, and fired from the Enterprise's command deck. The process takes approximately 4 minutes from initialization to detonation. If someone were to interrupt that sequence at the command level, the weapon wouldn't fire," Steve finished. "How do we get aboard?" "You surrender, as Kirk demands. But not alone. I will accompany you, claiming to deliver you personally as proof of my loyalty. Once aboard, we proceed to the bridge and neutralize Kirk before Trident can be activated." "That's insane," Akers said. "You'll both be killed the moment you transport over." "Perhaps," Imperial Spock agreed. "But the probability of success, while low, exceeds 0. All other options guarantee failure." Steve looked at the 2 Spocks, one from the Resistance, one from the Empire, both converging on the same conclusion from different philosophical directions. "We're out of time," Resistance Spock said. "Kirk will fire in 6 minutes regardless. The fleet can cover your approach, but we can't penetrate the Enterprise's shields for a direct assault. Then we use their own protocols against them." Steve turned to Imperial Spock. "Will they accept your authority to transport aboard with a prisoner?" "My command codes are still valid." "Yes." "Then we're doing this." Steve looked at Akers. "Continue the evacuation. Get as many people out as you can. If we fail—" "Don't fail," she interrupted, her voice rough with emotion. "That's an order, Captain." Steve smiled slightly. "Yes, ma'am." He tapped his comm. "Emperor Kirk, this is Captain Rogers. I accept your terms. I'm ready to surrender." Kirk's voice returned, dripping with satisfaction. "A wise choice, Captain. I'm curious whether you actually believe I'll spare these people, or if you're simply buying time for a futile escape attempt." "I believe you're a man who keeps his word when it serves his interests," Steve replied. And having a super soldier serum is too valuable to waste on spite. Clever. Very well. Commander Spock will escort you aboard. Come alone, unarmed. Your shield remains on the planet. Steve looked at the vibranium disc. It had been with him through every battle, every fight, every impossible situation. Leaving it felt like leaving a piece of himself behind. But if it bought these people even a few minutes more... He set it down gently, the star emblem catching the light. "Captain," T'Pana approached, her Vulcan composure cracking slightly. "What you do now will be remembered. Whether you succeed or fail, you have given us something the Empire cannot destroy, hope that freedom is possible." "Then make that hope count," Steve said. "Build something better than what we're fighting. Don't become them." Imperial Spock raised his communicator. "ISS Enterprise, 2 to beam up. Prisoner transfer. Authorization Spock Alpha 7-1. Acknowledged, Commander. Energizing." The world dissolved into light. Steve felt himself disassembled, streamed through space at light speed, and reassembled on a transporter pad aboard the Empire's flagship. The Enterprise's bridge crew stared at him like predators evaluating fresh meat, and Emperor Kirk smiled from his throne, Trident's activation sequence already glowing on the tactical display behind him. "Welcome aboard, Captain Rogers," Kirk said. "Now, let's discuss the terms of your permanent service to the Empire." Steve flexed his hands, feeling the absence of his shield. The weight of 2 million lives depending on what happened next. "I've got a counteroffer," he said. Kirk raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I fight you. Hand to hand, no weapons, just skill against skill. You win, you get everything. The serum, Trident demonstration, total victory. I win, you shut down Trident and let those people go." Kirk laughed, genuine amusement coloring his voice. "You want to challenge the Emperor of the Terran Empire to personal combat? That's wonderfully primitive. You've been calling me primitive since we met. Prove you're better." Kirk stood from his throne, his smile sharpening into something dangerous. "Very well, Captain. I accept. Let's see if your 20th century training matches 23rd century superiority." He drew a ceremonial blade from his belt, a monomolecular edge that could cut through duranium. Steve Rogers, unarmed and outmatched, prepared to fight an emperor for the fate of a world. The bridge of the ISS Enterprise cleared instantly, officers scrambling to form a circle around the command deck. Kirk shed his ceremonial sash, rolling his shoulders with the practiced ease of a man who'd fought his way to an empire's throne. His blade caught the light, its monomolecular edge humming with contained lethality. Steve circled opposite him, hands empty, assessing. Kirk moved like a trained fighter, balanced, confident, dangerous. But there was arrogance in his stance. The overconfidence of someone who'd rarely faced an opponent who could actually hurt him. "You know," Kirk said conversationally, "I've killed men with my bare hands. Klingon warriors, Romulan assassins, my own officers when they disappointed me. What makes you think a soldier from humanity's adolescence can challenge me?" "Because I've spent my whole life fighting bullies," Steve replied. "And they all have one thing in common. They're only strong when they think they can't lose." Kirk attacked. He moved fast, the blade arcing towards Steve's throat in a strike that would have decapitated a normal man. But Steve wasn't normal. His enhanced reflexes kicked in, and he swayed backward, feeling the blade whisper past his chin. Kirk followed with a horizontal slash, then a thrust, each movement technically perfect. Steve avoided them all by millimeters, reading Kirk's body language, predicting each strike. The super soldier serum gave him speed and strength, but decades of combat gave him something more valuable: experience. Kirk's eyes narrowed. "You're fast, good. This might actually be entertaining." He feinted high, struck low. Steve blocked with his forearm, ignoring the blade that scored a shallow cut across his skin. His enhanced healing was already working, but the pain was real. He grabbed Kirk's wrist, twisted, attempting to disarm him. Kirk anticipated it, reversing his grip and driving an elbow into Steve's ribs. The impact would have shattered a normal man's bones. Steve grunted, rolling with the force, converting defense into offense. His leg swept Kirk's, but the Emperor jumped back, maintaining distance. They circled again, both breathing harder now. "Trident activation in 90 seconds, a tactical officer announced nervously. Steve's eyes flicked to the display. The weapon was powering up, energy matrices aligning, targeting Deneva's coordinates locked in. 90 seconds before 2 million people died. Kirk noticed his glance and smiled. "Divided attention, Captain. That's fatal in combat." He lunged, blade extended in a move designed to force Steve backward, toward the edge of the platform where a fall would send him tumbling to the deck below. Steve saw the trap, saw Kirk's body weight commit to the thrust, and made his decision. He moved forward instead of back. The blade pierced his shoulder, driving through muscle and emerging from his back. Pain exploded through Steve's nervous system, white-hot and screaming. But he'd chosen the location deliberately. Nowhere vital, nothing that would stop him from fighting. And now he was inside Kirk's guard. Steve's fist drove into Kirk's solar plexus with super soldier enhanced force. The Emperor's breath evacuated his lungs in a whoosh. Steve's other hand grabbed Kirk's knife hand, preventing him from twisting the blade. Then he headbutted Kirk with precise force, breaking the Emperor's nose in a spray of blood. Kirk staggered. Steve yanked the blade from his own shoulder, blood streaming but healing already visible, and tossed it aside. It clattered across the deck, out of reach. "No weapons," Steve said through gritted teeth. "Just you and me." Kirk wiped blood from his face, his expression shifting from confidence to cold fury. "You're willing to die for people you've known for days? I'm willing to fight for people who deserve freedom. There's a difference." Kirk attacked with pure rage, abandoning technique for brutal violence. Punches, kicks, strikes designed to maim and kill. Steve deflected most, absorbed some, and returned every attack with calculated precision. They crashed across the bridge, scattering officers, slamming into consoles that sparked and died. "Trident activation in 30 seconds, the tactical officer reported. Steve drove Kirk backward, using his superior strength to force the Emperor toward the command throne. But Kirk was no amateur. He grabbed a fallen phaser, swinging it like a club. The weapon connected with Steve's injured shoulder, and fresh pain exploded through the healing wound. Steve's vision blurred momentarily. Kirk capitalized, driving a knee into Steve's stomach, then an elbow toward his temple. Steve barely blocked, feeling the impact reverberate through his bones. "You can't win," Kirk hissed. "Even if you kill me, Trident fires automatically. Those people die regardless. Then I'll make sure you die knowing you failed to break me." Steve surged forward with everything he had left. His fist connected with Kirk's jaw. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Each punch carried the weight of every person suffering under imperial tyranny, every child crying in a labor camp, every soul who'd given up hope. Kirk fell backward, sprawling across his throne. "Trident activation in 10 seconds, the tactical officer said, his voice shaking. Imperial Spock, who'd been standing motionless throughout the fight, suddenly moved. His hands flew across the tactical console with impossible speed, entering override codes that should have been impossible for anyone but the Emperor to access. "What are you doing?" Kirk shouted. "Choosing a different path," Spock replied calmly. "Trident requires dual authorization, Emperor and First Officer. I am providing my authorization code to abort the sequence." 5 seconds, 4, 3. The tactical display shifted from red to amber to green. The energy readings plummeted. Trident's power matrices disengaged, the weapon falling dormant. The bridge fell silent. Kirk stared at Spock with absolute betrayal. You're committing treason. I am committing logic, Spock corrected. Captain Rogers demonstrated that the Empire's methodology is fundamentally unstable. A government sustained by fear inevitably creates resistance. A government sustained by mutual benefit creates stability. I choose stability. Steve pulled himself to his feet, blood still seeping from his shoulder but the wound visibly closing. It's over, Kirk. Trident's down, Deneva's population is evacuating, and your garrison surrendered 10 minutes ago. Nothing is over. Kirk reached for another weapon, but Steve was faster. He grabbed Kirk's wrist, applied a nerve strike Natasha had taught him years ago, and the Emperor crumpled, unconscious. The bridge crew stood frozen, uncertain whether to defend their fallen Emperor or acknowledge the new reality. Spock addressed them with absolute authority. Emperor Kirk has been defeated in single combat, as is Imperial tradition. Per Section 7 of Imperial Code, command transfers to the ranking officer. Until a new Emperor is confirmed, I am assuming operational authority. One by one, the officers nodded acceptance, not because they believed in Spock's cause, but because the Empire respected strength, and Kirk had just demonstrated weakness. Steve's comm crackled, Uhura's voice thick with emotion. Steve, we're reading Trident shut down. Did you? It's done, Steve said, allowing himself to slump against a console. Deneva's safe. How's the evacuation? 600,000 evacuated so far. We're running out of transport capacity, but the Imperial fleet isn't firing. They're withdrawing. Steve looked at Spock, who nodded confirmation. I have ordered all Imperial forces to stand down. The prisoners of Deneva are hereby granted full citizenship and freedom of movement. The labor camp is dissolved effective immediately. Resistant Spock's voice joined the channel from his ship. Fascinating. The logical Spock makes an illogical choice, and the illogical rebellion achieves a logical victory. The universe remains paradoxical. The universe remains free, Steve corrected, his strength finally giving out. He slid down the console, sitting hard on the deck. At least for now. Imperial Spock approached, raising an eyebrow at Steve's condition. You require medical attention, Captain. Your shoulder wound, while healing, could become infected without proper treatment. I've had worse. I do not doubt it. Nevertheless, allow me to summon medical personnel. Spock paused. You have accomplished something remarkable, Captain Rogers. You have demonstrated that even in a universe defined by cruelty, individuals can choose compassion, that principles can triumph over pragmatism. It is inspiring. What happens now? Steve asked. Now, we attempt something unprecedented, building a government that serves its people rather than enslaving them. The Empire will not fall easily. Many worlds will resist change, but you have proven that change is possible. Spock extended his hand. Will you help us build something better? Steve looked at the offered hand, at the Vulcan who'd abandoned everything he'd been taught to choose a harder path, then at the view screen showing Deneva below. Freed prisoners flooding across a world that was finally, truly theirs. He thought about Peggy, about the dance he'd never gotten, about the life he'd left behind 3 centuries ago. But he also thought about the 2 million people who'd been slaves yesterday and were free today. Yeah, Steve said, clasping Spock's hand and letting the Vulcan pull him to his feet. Let's build something better. The transformation came slowly, as all meaningful change does. Imperial Spock, now simply Commander Spock, dissolved the Terran Empire over the following months, replacing it with the new Federation, a governing body built on representation rather than domination. Freed colonies sent delegates. Alien species joined as equals, not subjects. The transition was violent in places, peaceful in others, but it moved forward with inexorable momentum. Steve Rogers became the symbol that held it together, the soldier out of time who'd proven that tyranny could be challenged, that one person's conviction could ignite a galaxy-wide revolution. He trained resistance fighters, led diplomatic missions, and reminded people that freedom required constant vigilance. But late at night, standing on the observation deck of the rebuilt Firebase Tango, now a Federation outpost, Steve thought about home. About a dance left unfinished, a life interrupted, a century that wasn't his. Spock found him there one evening, carrying a data tablet. "I have analyzed the Tesseract readings from your arrival. With sufficient power and precise calculations, dimensional transit may be possible. You could send me home, perhaps. The probability is 37%. The risk is considerable." Steve looked at the stars, so many more than he'd ever known, each one representing possibilities, civilizations, lives. Then he looked at the tablet showing Deneva, where children played freely in streets once lined with guard towers. "I think," Steve said slowly, "home is where you're needed most, and right now, that's here." Spock raised an eyebrow. A surprisingly logical conclusion for one who claims to operate on emotion and principle. Maybe logic and principle aren't as different as you think. The new Federation had a long road ahead. Former enemies to reconcile, systems to rebuild, cultures to integrate. It would take decades, perhaps centuries, to heal the wounds the Empire had inflicted. But it had something the Empire never did: hope, freely given and honestly earned. And as long as Steve Rogers drew breath, he'd protect that hope with everything he had. Because some things transcended time, dimension, or circumstance. The fight for freedom was always worth it. New worlds await. More stories soon.